Alright, I know this take is going to paint a bullseye on my back, but we need to be honest. The Loporrits are astronomically stupid, and I mean everything about them. They are dumb and useless, and for the record, we all know who I blame for that.
You fucking whore!
As usual, we will be discussing spoilers of all matters, big and small. If you're new to the game and don't want to have the experience ruined, more than the script will do on its own anyways, let this be your warning. Ah yes, the Moon, a prison for Zodiark's sundered husk, and an escape vessel in case the final days returned and humanity needed to jump ship and run. It looks rather nice on the surface, doesn't it? At the very start, that was my reaction. That Hydaelyn had been so thorough as to plan contingencies for the final days genuinely impressed me. I love it when characters plan 1,000 moves ahead. It demonstrates not only initiative, but also concedes that plot armor is a myth and nobody should be relying on it to save the day. That and the general ambience of the moon was just relaxing. The music only reinforced that. Nice touch, Soken. So, we get to the other side of the map and meet the Watcher's collaborators. These furry little tards, one of many callbacks to Final Fantasy IV. Endwalker kind of overdid that by the post patches. Anyway, so far so good. What do we learn when first meeting these little guys? Or however they self-identify. They confirm the moon's purpose, how they will travel the stars in search of a new home, a worst case scenario should the worst transpire. Unfortunately, it wasn't long before I began to identify some issues. Something the game itself was kind enough to point out.
Well, Amarotims were a great deal taller. In the present day, persons of such prodigious size are exceedingly rare.
So, you're saying everyone's not like the Watcher? Oh, confound it all! Someone could have at least scribbled a note about your profound miniaturization.
Square, buddy, I mean, no offense. But what in the great unfathomable reliquary of fantasy is this shit? Goofy antics aside, though those also get tiresome very quickly, you mean to say that these bunny folk were so disconnected from the planet they were tasked with saving that they didn't even know what size the people were? The Loporrits have lived on the moon potentially since the Sundering, 12 millennia, and all that time and all those long centuries, did they never visit the planet even once? I know they tend to hibernate, but there's still plenty of time for them to do something. Did they not survey, take samples, invest in and analyze the Theris and its many unique peoples? They just sat up here with hardly a clue on what they were doing, jeopardizing their very mission with reckless abandon and with maximum incompetence.
Sure, you might not be the best squad, might not be smart, or energetic, or have any skills that qualify you for duty in any other legitimately recognized military unit.
Alright, so granted, they do try to conjure up an explanation for this. It's stated that visiting the planet was strictly forbidden, in case their technology was stolen or their purpose exposed. Oh wonderful, the Loporrits had no ability to research the world they were tasked with saving to better preserve their intentions of saving it. That is remarkably moronic. That's like a professional chef never learning to cook because they're allergic to certain ingredients. That one dumbass decision of theirs made all their plans and intentions futile, and for completely moronic reasons. In hindsight, this could have only been planned out by Venat. She's just low enough to believe it. Now note that Living Way mentions collaborators of theirs on the Theris, people who've been in contact with the moon for some time. Even as cryptic as they tried to be, I think every one of us knew of a Sharlayan. The second we entered Labyrinthos, my first thought was, oh neat, a doomsday bunker. And I wasn't far off. It's fine that it was obvious, not every detail needs to be a twist, though withholding that information was rather wasteful. As if there was anybody else it could have been. That's not the issue. What is, however, is the Loporrits' blatant ignorance. They are demented to and beyond the point of it being a medical issue. Those turbans of theirs are probably covering the helmets they're required to wear at all times, lest they suffer any more brain damage. Everything about this so-called plan is so blatantly mishandled, so absurd, by the end of our short tenure on the moon. It felt more akin to a comedy skit than a contingency plan to save our species. To list off the issues, the Loporrits had no clue the size of the average person. They thought everybody was Watcher size. Even though they were created after the Sundering, there was apparently no attempt on any level to observe the peoples of the planet for 12,000 years. It was such a twist, in fact, that they had to rebuild the entire living quarters top to bottom because of the size issue. The most menial efforts to study a Theris would have remedied this issue, this very easily fixable issue. With all these automated drones, how hard would it have been to send surveyors of the planet every few centuries to analyze, take stock of the situation?
They're just standing there and talking, okay? That's all they're doing. That's all they ever do is just stand there and talk.
Members of the first brood like Vitra can casually fly to the moon on his own. These little guys have no excuse. The writers obviously wanted to have some fun here. Fair enough. Let's say the Loporrits had visited Theris before. You could have painted these numerous surveys as the equivalent of alien sightings, random bunny-shaped machines and objects uncovered over the centuries.
I'm an alien.
With conspiracy theorists rising up insisting there's life on the moon and it's watching our every move.
I am an alien.
I think the Hildebrand quest did something like that. Get that dork involved, make him out to be a joke, only to discover when we visit the moon that he was right.
I'm an alien. I am an alien. I am an alien. I am an alien.
Our more stoic cast members can be taken aback that the lunatic was right on the money. You can't have humor without making your narrative a joke, which is precisely what Endwalker did to itself with the Loporrits' sheer stupidity. Did Hydaelyn forget to provide them with any critical thinking skills? The Loporrits have some impressive tech, and they have specialists in different areas. There's plenty evidence of organization and problem-solving capabilities. Yet an actual hands-on approach with the very people they were tasked with safeguarding? That was something they never tried nor considered. People, we just started, we just got here, and a cataclysmic error has already been uncovered. Back to those living quarters I mentioned, Smileton I think it's called. It's one of the first dungeons we unlocked after MSQ, where the advanced machines carving out the place went rogue and the whole joint turned into Hogwarts from hell, with randomly shifting hallways and staircases leading us all over the place, and trapping the many Loporrits who had been working in there. It was such a debacle, little old us had to get involved to shut the system down. Can you imagine what would have happened if the evacuation became our only option? The people who would have made it to the moon, which is problematic on its own, trust me, they most likely would have died in this disaster, all thanks to the stupendous incompetence of our supposed caretakers. Which is all happening because, again, none of these tards ever bothered to take a look at the planet right outside their door. The moon wasn't humanity's last hope, it was a death trap for Christ's sake. None of that includes the real kicker nobody in this game felt the need to address. What about the other races? Theris has an insane amount of biodiversity, all with their own needs. Rogadans, or is it Rogadans? Screw it, Rose. They obviously need far more space than Lalafels. Bakote, especially females, are rather small. And don't even get me started on the aura. The women are generally half the size of the men. And what about the beast tribes? Each group needs their own habitat according to their physiology. There are logistical issues here the size differences do not remotely touch on. Being unaware of those size differences, I somehow doubt the Loporrits took that into consideration. Does that mean the beast tribes will all be left to die, abandoned and forgotten? What about countries in other parts of the world? Mericidia, a place we've heard about for ages but never visited. Jorol hadn't been visited yet either. What was the plan for these far-off places? Evacuating a planet is an unprecedented undertaking that forces one to ask the difficult questions. Who goes first? Who gets left behind? Had the worst come to pass, would these other nations around the globe be left to die? Would Garlemald? Honestly, you could occupy an entire expansion with this moral dilemma. Instead, like so much else, it was crammed into an already bloated script, forcing most of the narrative potential to be swept under the rug and ignored, and all that value gets pissed away as a result. A recurring theme with 14 these days. A section of Endwalker dedicated to different nations determining who goes and who's left behind would perfectly manifest the melancholia of the end times. Huge swaths of Theris' population will be left to die. A lost cause, a dying world, and what lengths people would go through to persevere. Instead, we got miniature furries with a collective IQ just south of Forrest Gump. On the plus side, there's certain characters that could have been weeded out by the selection process. A universe without Wuk-Lama. I can't say I wouldn't blow up the planet to avoid the crap we dealt with in Dawntrail, but setting aside my vindictiveness, genociding a whole planet for a personal grudge isn't bad taste. That's pretty much what Venat did to her civilization, and we hate that twat.
Was that really necessary?
They'll live.
No, they won't.
Oh, yeah, I see your point.
On to the next point. Food production. Carrots. That's what the little pricks have to offer. But they're special carrots simulating human emotions to make you feel all kinds of happiness and euphoria. Different types that help spark different feelings and inspirations. So they're LSD carrots. Our food supply for the journey is spiked with neurotransmitters to rewire our brains. Suddenly this comedy show has gotten dark. Now, I'm sure there's other nutrients in these things, but let's be real, people can't be made to subsist on freaking carrots. This issue makes even less sense than the size problem, because the Sharlayans have been sending information to the Loporrits, getting them up to speed on how humanity functions. How could they get the dumbass idea that everything you need should be crammed into a carrot? I get that they're rabbits, but that's a stereotype and just another piece of humor cheapening this serious dilemma. Between this and the ridiculous fashion show they put on for us, I was already checked out completely from the Loporrit plotline. Then to follow up, the recreational area, this park, is blatantly fake and disconnected from the natural environment they're trying to replicate. They f***ed up trees, people. For anybody interested in arguing against these critiques, feel free to start there. The Loporrits up trees. Did the Sharlayans forget to include pictures with their handy little book? You know what? I'ma walk to a new planet instead. A few thousand light years. I could use the freshness of the vacuum of space. Can't be worse than what this place will do to us. It was obvious very quickly Square wasn't taking this seriously, so why the hell should we? It's only 10 years of storytelling we're trying to wrap up. It's not like we should have standards for any of this.
I'll up yours.
What was that?
Up yours, sir.
That's better!
Another thing to note. All these drones running around the burrow? The bunny bots? Rabbit drones? You know what? Let's have some fun. I'll pin a comment below and you guys can vote. Bunny bots or rabbit drones? Whichever name wins becomes canon. Anyways, the automated security in this place openly attacks you. Yeah, again, game mechanics. I understand this is an area map. It's going to have enemies and fates and such. But narratively, why the sweet unholy hell is the automated security attacking randoms like this? Urianger even comments on it at one point. So it's not a case of main character syndrome, it's official. The robots are rebelling. Screw the Endsinger. Final Fantasy is about to get a robot apocalypse. And before you ask, yes, I would have preferred that. And now the game does attempt to address these issues with Urianger.
'Twould be my pleasure to assist you and yours in embarking on a journey of self-discovery and enlightenment. There you have it. I shall remain with the Loporrits to ensure that all is in order.
And I will say, if nothing else, this moment with them placating the Loporrits, offering to stay with them, guide them towards improving their work, it was really nice. A chance for him to step up from the sidelines and accomplish something amazing. We even have a genuinely funny moment here.
And thou, my friend, I do not think we've met.
My name is Puddingway.
Puddingway, the first one, the real one. Of course, Square botched this too by doing nothing with the moon for the rest of the story. Sure, there's some talk here and there, the Loporrits visit Sharlayan, something they should have done ages ago, but we see no real progress here on out regarding their efforts. Not to mention, as soon as we're back from Elpis, the one and only method of getting to the moon, the teleportation pad, is cut off thanks to the final days arriving in Garlemald. I will be tearing that issue a new one as well. Everything about the Exodus or Urianger's efforts takes a back seat while we play nice with the Forum and work on the Ragnarok. So, nice a moment as it was, the writers did very little with it. And they've proceeded to do nothing with Urianger ever since then, which is a genuine loss. Again, I see what they were thinking. The world's ending, the bad guys are winning. The horrifying apocalypse even the ancients couldn't overcome was about to wipe us off the map. Interjecting a bit of humor to lighten the mood isn't out of the question. But they overdid it. By several orders of magnitude. The Loporrits are a complete joke. Using the moon to evacuate the populace is a complete joke by extension. None of us were convinced this plan was viable in the slightest. The living quarters are wrecked. The food production is inefficient. The only natural environment they provide is faker than the Emmys. And these miniature little shites have no clue what they're doing at all.
My sensors indicate you don't stand a chance.
They are clueless, petulant, with a backwards perspective on nutrition and mental health. Even in terms of combat, they're pathetic. They easily lost to us. Then Zero and post-Endwalker, their machinery, which should provide a technological advantage, is beaten at every turn. Can you imagine what would have happened if someone turned into a monster during the journey? It would have been a slaughter, even if they evacuated enough people to the moon. Even if they could provide enough resources to sustain them until a new planet is found. The Song of Oblivion would eventually destroy the moon long before their mission could be accomplished. Nothing anywhere is provided on how they would tackle that. Without Zodiark's ether shield, there was no sanctuary to be found. It was a failed strategy from the very beginning. And let's touch on that where we're at it. Finding a new home. They claim to have found several potential worlds, but with no way of knowing if they're suited for resettlement. Okay, you couldn't be bothered to visit the planet right outside, so of course you never sent any probes out into the stars. Despite possessing the technology to do so, what's the holdup? All these centuries, there's no reason not to have cataloged the cosmos for viable planets, full landscape scanned and analyzed. Instead, we're to invoke the powers of Leroy Jenkins and just hop around hoping for the best. This is the plan Venat established, after abandoning her people to die horrific deaths and fade into obscurity. Is anybody surprised we're disgusted with this broad? The Loporrits were such a tonal shift, their antics destroyed any tension the game had built up. Now, in fact, Endwalker is notorious for spoiling the mood at virtually every turn. The game's theme of overcoming despair, for example, when do we actually experience it? Firstly, we defeat Zodiark, a brainless choice if I ever saw one, having us absolutely crushed by his power, reminding us that pure strength and a noble heart aren't going to save the day. Now, no despair. Hydaelyn, having innumerous examples of being a villain, she lied, manipulated, left Amarok to suffer, believing them incapable of the future she personally envisioned. Her turning on us, our supposed benefactor, would have been a knife in the heart after our shared history. Instead, she was always on our side. There was never a hint of doubt towards her benevolence. No despair. Ultima Thule, when the Scions die one after the other, carrying us closer to the Medion's nest, just to respawn, defiling the emotions this zone had teased us with, time after time. The very concept of despair is kept from us, instead shoving a family-friendly narrative in our faces, safe for all audiences. It was obvious Square wanted to make something more kid-friendly to appeal to as wide an audience as possible, an act that only served to deteriorate the very product they're pushing. And let me tell you guys something, a product made for everybody inevitably appeals to nobody. There's no emotion, you kept that from us to play it safe. There's no satisfaction. The myriads of experiences one expects from the world ending were all mild, tame, fleeting, inconsequential. The few moments where they let loose were too few and far between. I've discussed how some of them, like the Satrap's death, dropped the ball just as badly. The Loporrits are just another facet of this disappointment. Even post-Endwalker redoubled the issues. With their function no longer needed, the Loporrits found themselves feeling lost, wayward. They have no real identity now that the moon's function is no longer needed. They were instilled with such little agency that they needed our help to find new interests to motivate them onward. It was the main concept behind the Crafter Beast Tribe and Endwalker. Sure, this is a side gig rather than MSQ, so we can't argue it's not meant to be taken seriously. But this is a follow-up to an important plot point in the main game. I'd argue that still matters. You know, not only were the Loporrits incapable of carrying out the purpose they were created for, they can't do a damn thing themselves with that purpose fulfilled. They have nothing. They were given nothing by Hydaelyn. No ability to think for themselves, to adapt to new situations. How could she create something this inept and still be treated with such reverence? She went out of her way to make the Loporrits incompetent at every turn, ensuring that their function would fall short and fail, which would only ensure humanity's extinction when the final days returned, which, thanks to us, and her own deliberate actions and inactions, she already knew was inevitable, and the servants she created were incapable of doing anything to stop it. They were treated like automatons, weakened and feeble to ensure nobody could ever question her choices no matter the outcome. Even ourselves, we were never afforded the chance to call her out. This woman played God with all of us.
No one will find your bodies, no one will know the truth, and no one is going to stop us from killing every last person on this planet.
A quick side note, wasn't sure where else to squeeze this in, but it's mentioned that the Loporrits work halted after Dalamud was constructed. They were apparently afraid of its function, so not much progress was made during the millennia the Red Moon hung in orbit. Oddly enough, Hydaelyn informed them of the moon's destruction and things got back on track. But never did she mention that the moon was not a threat to them in the first place. There's some real selective interactions in this story, it's not helping the situation. That's literal millennia the moon's been doing nothing, for rather trivial reasons. Oh yeah, before I forget, I mentioned Sharlayan being in league with the Loporrits. How exactly were they communicating? Living Way here has a lengthy book full of information, how did they get that? Somehow these two groups were able to communicate details to one another and even send physical objects. Yet this method is never discussed in game. I read Wikipedia entries, the Encyclopedia Eorzea, and even watched some playthroughs on YouTube just in case I missed something. It is never explicitly explained, which creates several problems, not least of all with the Crafter Beast Tribe. One of the last tasks is building a radio so the Loporrits may relay their thoughts to the people on the planet's surface. Foregoing the fact that most of these people don't have access to radios, so your message isn't really getting around, why would they need a radio if they already have the means of speaking to one another? Why not use that to speak to Atheris? Also, it's a missed opportunity not doing more with this bit. Just look at the setup. We could have had a Joe Rogan podcast in our Final Fantasy game. That would be hilarious. This is a major problem, and whatever this method was, couldn't it be utilized to help with the evacuation? Sharlayan transported physical books and other materials to the Loporrits. That will be handy in this crisis. Yet, the method and means is never discussed, never even inquired by the Scions. Honestly, it just makes the many faux pas we're dealing with look even more ridiculous. There is so much vagueness in this plotline, it can only contradict itself again and again. Why is everything about the so-called plan so goddamn confusing? For the record, the Watcher isn't any better off. I've already covered him in a previous video, link included below if you're interested, For today, what matters is that he was a pathetic shadow of the man he was in Venat's time, possessing only vague recollections of the pre-sundered world. All the Watcher does now is lounge around in his tower. He exposits a bit, but that's really it. Even when the seals are destroyed and he finally has something to do, he pawns responsibility onto us, then just loiters up on that balcony, doesn't stop the threat or reinforce the final seal, didn't create a barrier or anything. Okay, technically he's impeded by all these apparitions around the moon, but that's just making excuses to give us crap to do. The Watcher does nothing in this segment that would classify as useful. He was meant to safeguard Zodiark's prison, but the moment somebody attempts to spring the Edgelord god from prison, the Watcher is completely useless. Why did Hydaelyn create someone incapable of doing anything? The more we look into it, the more this failsafe of hers looks like empty grandstanding, a fraud attempting to only make it look like effort was made while leaving the world high and dry.
We don't get paid enough to do stuff.
Then to add a cyanide cocktail to this death orgy, we too stood around while the final seal was destroyed. Time was of the essence, and we just pissed it away chatting with a rather jovial ghost. Do not get me wrong, connecting with the real Hydaelyn was a nice moment, opening the door to our main interactions with him at Elpis. But to dick around while Xenos was hunting down the final seal was peak moronic. Just the amount of stupidity this script requires to validate itself. The writers must have been taking turns chucking paint thinner. All of Hydaelyn's creations were inadequate. This is yet another botched narrative, pointing towards the albino she-witch being far more malevolent than what the script tried portraying her as. She spent considerable power creating the moon, imprisoning Zodiark, then birthing the Loporrits and the Watcher, and all of it was designed to fail from the very beginning. I can see why many of you commenting point out Hydaelyn was intended to be a villain originally, or that Venat had made up her mind the second Medion made her report back at Catesis. Every avenue we explore only reinforces these ideas. That she made her minions utterly incapable of fulfilling their duties and having no way of validating their existences after we saved the damn universe only makes Hydaelyn look like a manipulative monster purposely misleading us. All of this incompetence, all of this failure, pushing humanity to the brink. Venat can preach till hell freezes over about the need to struggle, to experience strife so we may overcome despair. Her every action in Endwalker leads from bad to worse to horrifying. I do not understand how the writers looked back on this project and thought there was nothing wrong with this image. Hydaelyn's benevolent status hinges absolutely on us being told so, repeatedly. The only alternative is she's blatantly incompetent, and we never should have trusted her to safeguard the world when we traveled back from the past. In any situation, the implications are horrendous. None of this includes an equally appalling question. How the hell were they planning to get people to the moon? The Loporrits have no ship of their own, which again, given their technology, is completely ridiculous. The Loporrits should have had an entire fleet by the time the final days reignited. A 12,000-year investment, and this is what we get, good lord. The only method we see is this single teleportation pad in the Tower of Babel. Was this originally the Loporrits? Did the Ascians steal it? It was noted that they had visited the moon numerous times over the millennia, though with the ability to teleport themselves, not sure they need the assist, who the hell knows. I am genuinely lost on this one. Again, I consulted the wiki, Encyclopedia Eorzea's, and even Googled in hopes of getting some clarification, but I could find nothing about their plans for getting the populace to the moon, outside of the Sharlayans, which I will cover in a moment. If any of you have information on that, please share in the comments, but to cover my bases, even if we assume the teleportation pad was originally the Loporrits, there's still only the one. That's very risky. Anything goes wrong with that one method, and you're completely screwed, which, spoiler, is precisely what happens when the final days reach Garlemald and the tower is cut off, leaving the entire planet stranded. If the pad was not theirs, then the Loporrits had no other means of evacuating Theris, and they are again moronic.
I have resolved to do a much better job motivating all of you retards.
And the only other faction involved in this plan is equally inept. And now we begin the other half of this dumbass convention, the Sharlayans. They too have been busy working with the moon's residents since making contact with Hydaelyn 270 years prior. They've provided much information on the planet's inhabitants for the Loporrits to study, making one wonder how these bunny pricks still screwed up so much with a literal nation of book nerds helping out, but I digress. What really matters is they too have been developing an escape vessel for the final days. Perhaps with their aid, the Loporrits saw no need to make preparations of their own, which is also stupid as hell. What's more though, it was only around 300 years since these two groups met. What exactly was their plan before that? These some odd 11,730 years. Did the Loporrits have genuinely no knowledge of anything regarding the Theris? Did Hydaelyn not advise them to take their task more seriously? Or did she bank on these two groups happening across each other by chance? I mentioned in my Venat video that it's unlikely we would have brought up the Sharlayans in our recap of their apocalyptic future. Incorporating this little country into her machinations is a mighty stretch, all things considered. I'm genuinely at a loss for how mismanaged the fate of our star is with these pack of idiots spearheading the operation. We have an inefficient sanctuary that stands no chance of preserving humanity, no proper means of reaching said sanctuary even if it was safe. And everybody in charge of this operation is peak demented, just to stir some artificial difficulty into the plot. That is precisely what this is, people, artificial difficulty. There's no reason for the Loporrits to be this inept outside of making the moon less viable an option, thus compelling our characters to seek out alternate means to save the day. Again, courtesy of this nutjob.
You fucking whore!
That's an argument for later. This level of disorganization on behalf of a very suspicious character we're never allowed to challenge ruins what these plot points are meant to do. The world is ending, we're on the clock, and there are many difficulties to overcome if we hope to survive. These roadblocks I'm talking about do feed into that sort of melancholia the writers evidently wanted. However, they ruined that melancholia when Venat's backup plan with the moon turned into a comedy show. Everything we're witnessing in Endwalker is just peak stupid. It's messy, it's embarrassing, it's unbelievable. I cannot believe so many different elements are this inefficient, this inadequate. I don't feel like we're on the clock as Doomsday approaches. I feel like the writers are wasting our time with pointless gags and side quests. And it still gets worse. There is so much banking on Sharlayan completing their space vessel, which is why I find it interesting that despite nearly 300 years of preparation, the ship is still not ready. Firstly, it was recovered parts from Demented just 5 years prior that made this vessel a possibility. So 5 years effort out of a 270-year investment. Not a great ratio. 5 years of effort out of 12,000 though, substantially freaking worse. Imagine if the final day started just a couple years earlier. We'd all be thoroughly fucked up the arse in the most unsettling ways imaginable. By the way, it's only thanks to the Scions that the ship was made capable of traversing the stars. Shouldn't we get to name it? I mean, it's our ship in the end.
Dibs.
What?
Dibs. I just called dibs. This is my ship now. Dibs.
No, it isn't, jackass. We found it first.
Yeah, but you didn't call dibs. I did. Dibs.
Yeah, you guys remember that part? The ether burners needed for propelling the ship required some special components we were keen in obtaining. Yes, all these people we've befriended over the years gathering to aid us in our time of need was quite inspiring. It's just a serendipitous bullshit we had to go through that ruins it. How am I supposed to feel elated knowing there's no reason our so-called escape plan was so flawed that we had to step up and pull this shite fest together? It's like in Dawn Trail, every time something important was happening, Woklama got thrown into the scene, making everything about her. Even in situations where she didn't do a damn thing. It deprives the surrounding cast of relevance, defeating the point of them being involved, and we inadvertently do something similar with forcing the Scions to be vital to completing the Ragnarok. For a plan 12,000 years in the making, these idiots are pushing us eerily close to failure. Speaking of, the ship itself. This is supposed to be our escape vessel to evacuate an entire planet. Look at the size of this thing. It's not an escape ship, it's a luxury cruiser. Who the specter hell designed this thing? Sure, certain cutscenes makes it look bigger, like this one here. Don't know why they bothered. How is this little matchbox car gonna evacuate anybody? You couldn't even fit the entire forum on board. Just think about it. Like the teleportation pad, if one thing goes wrong with the Ragnarok, then the planet and everybody on it is screwed. And since we take the ship to Ultima Thule, guess what? Everybody on the planet is thoroughly screwed. We've seen how big and grotesque these transformations triggered by the Song of Oblivion are. Imagine somebody turning into a beast while in transit. These things would tear the ship apart, and you could only transport a small number at a time. You would never get enough people to the moon before something eventually goes wrong. Let's look at the Endwalker title screen. See that big-ass thing heading for the moon? That's what I thought our escape vessel would be. In fact, the wife had been theorizing that they would retrofit the Void Ark for this journey instead, which is far more in line with the opening cinematic. It would be a great reuse of resources on the developer's part and a neat little nod to past events in-game, just like Omega and Alexander were with the Crystal Tower and Shadowbringers. Granted, this giant domino with engines isn't very appealing.
Sometimes you just gotta go for style points. Ooh-ah.
But pragmatically, a larger vessel would make the situation far more believable. And even if something goes wrong, a massive ship like this could transport enough people to ensure humanity's survival in a single go. The odds of success are much higher. This doesn't even cover other resources the many flora and fauna of Etheirys would need to be transported to, other supplies, cultural artifacts, tome of information to ensure the many cultures of humanity would live on, even if people were left behind. But nah, we get a luxury cruiser to save the world. How the hell did he plan on transporting all of that on this little thing? The Sharlayans are morons. None of this touches base on providing the actual fuel. Yeah, Hydaelyn had to do that. How convenient that of all the things Hydaelyn could have done to change history for the better, it's this mass of raw crystallized ether she opts to provide. Right when we needed it too. Sure, the Sharlayans had the ether front to draw energy from, but seeing as to how we had to dungeon dive our way to get to that massive reservoir, I can't help but wonder if that was another gross oversight by the Sharlayans. What happened to Hydaelyn not doing anything? At least she changed history. Why was this the one thing she opted to do herself after letting literal billions die while she sat on her thick vanilla backside for 12,000 years? For that matter, why did she get the Sharlayans involved at all? For all she knew, providing such crucial information and resources like this could have had major time-altering effects. The times where Hydaelyn chooses to be proactive and not are beyond baffling. It's all a matter of plot convenience rather than character motivation or logic. Also to note, just because I love tearing this game apart and I'm apparently a sadist, Hermes originally stated to rely on dynamis to power the Meteon through space, due to the energy requirements for space travel. Yet Hydaelyn compiled enough ether herself to push us to the literal edge of creation, their words, not mine, even if this took centuries to do. Hermes, with Amarot's most advanced research facility at his disposal, and the ludicrously higher ether content of the pre-sundered world, it's starting to look like him relying on emo power was also a contrived waste of effort, as is so much else in Endwalker, I'm afraid. And so, the Ragnarok's new mission is realized. The planet's one and only escape vessel will be used to reach Ultima Thule and defeat the embodiment of despair, save the universe, and force everybody to die a horrifying death if we fail. Which, given how quickly our mission to Ultima Thule went to hell, it's obvious the odds weren't in our favor. Honestly, we were in a zone that operated on entirely different principles of reality, where emotion dictated action over logic and reason. What luck that Thangrid's sacrifice was also exactly what was needed to advance the plot. Imagine if not and we all died immediately. Ooh, what an embarrassment. The astronomical odds continue in our favor. I could rant plenty about Ultima Thule, so I may save that topic for another video. Leave your thoughts down below if that sounds interesting to you guys. I cannot help but ponder how different Endwalker would have been if they decided to take the moon plotline seriously. Imagine it. Imagine when we meet the Loporrits and everything is perfect, or nearly perfect. They have visited Etheirys many times, taken samples of foodstuffs to provide all the nourishment required. The park area is lush and real, incorporating the diverse wildlife of the planet. It could have been a more advanced version of Loporrits when you think about it. The Loporrits, competent and prepared for the end times, to shepherd humanity to a new home. They could even have several methods to create a new ether shield on this new world. Not strong enough to save Etheirys, unfortunately, but perhaps potent enough to hide our future home from the final days. Someplace the Meteon would never find us. Had everything been competently handled, it would force us to face a major dilemma of, is it worth staying and fighting when escape has much greater odds? Do we fight to protect what we value? Or is it stubbornness compelling us to reject the exodus? Virtue or pride, as it were. Between the inadequate resources, dysfunctional living quarters, zero competent defenses should anything go wrong, not to mention the utter lack of understanding of Etheirys' people despite the Loporrits crying out their love for them. Reminds me too much of Wuklama, claims a love for people, had never traveled the country in any capacity. Why the hell does Square keep compiling this garbage? The game never took the Exodus seriously, it was played for laughs, then abandoned so the rest of the story could progress. In fact, to showcase how utterly useless the Loporrits were, cut them from the plot entirely and ask yourselves, what do we even lose? The moon provides nothing vital in stopping the Endsinger. All we needed was the Mother Crystal and the Ragnarok. Perhaps the Loporrits helped in its design, but we could work around such trivialities. And the fact they were the ones piloting the vessel when we traveled to Ultima Thule? Please, you easily could have shoved some nameless Sharlayan engineers into these chairs. Using the moon to escape the apocalypse should have been a major element of Endwalker. Yet when we break things down, we could have cut the entire plotline from the game and lose nothing more than an hour or two of gameplay. Something that would have benefited other areas like Garlemald or Elpis far better. Except for Pudding Way, the first one, the real one. They can stay. Fun fact, change their name to Pizza Way and they're basically my spirit guide.
Holy mother of Satan. Dibs. Not now.
The only genuine loss will be Urianger's eloquent moments with the Loporrits. Enjoyable as they were, the writers did nothing major, making these just a few tender moments with little to no weight behind them. And for the record, I take no joy in saying that. I like Urianger, and I am angry he was treated so poorly. I'm angry Endwalker was treated so poorly. And to think there are people out there still claiming Endwalker has the best writing in the series. Alright, I'm tired, frustrated, and need a nap. I'm gonna go do that. Leave your own thoughts below, like and subscribe. I'll see you guys next time.